Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. It's good to be with you. Thank you for joining us. Today we want to begin by bringing in House Speaker Cameron Sexton, District 25 representative, which, in case you don't know, Cumberland and Putnam counties, or at least part of that county. Thank you very much for coming in. This will be, I think, the last segment, last show that we have before the new year as we get closer to the General Assembly. As Speaker of the House, which you will be serving again as Speaker, I want to know how you define that role. What does that leadership role mean to you?
Well, it encompasses a lot of different things. One is working with the governor and lieutenant governor on policy and the budget, make sure we're heading in the right direction. It's also trying to put people in the House, since I'm in charge of the House, in right positions so where they have passion for, whether that's on what committees, what policy issues they believe in, trying to put people in the right places. Also making sure that we maintain decorum and respect for one another as well. And also functioning with support staff and making sure that we're making the right decisions on who we hire and what we're doing to enrich and improve their learning capability to improve their job performance as well.
I'm assuming on the other side of the aisle they might not like it, but you clearly have the support because you are doing it again. Yeah. What does that mean to you to know that you have that support? Well,
it's great that the Republican caucus does support me. I think they feel like we're going in the right direction. Listen, under my leadership in the last 5 years, Tennessee is the most Republican General Assembly in the country, most conservative. And so I think we're making inroads. The other side of the aisle, I think some of them do like me. I think we get along with some of them just don't, and that's okay. But we're going to continue to move Tennessee forward and do what we feel like we should do, as well as what Tennesseans want us to do.
All right. Well, the question is, if we want to say that, should we be moving forward with the voucher plan or Education Freedom Act of 2025, however you want to call it? Basically, in case anyone doesn't know, it's where about $7,000 will be available to people for moving their students from one school to another school. It came up last time, did not pass. The governor completely supports it. Where do you think that's headed this session?
Well, I think we're heading in the right direction. We're working on members, and there's a lot of people working to garner votes and whipping votes. I think we're very close to getting there if we're not already there by now. What I will say is, look, what we saw during COVID was school systems that shut down, that forced masks, that forced things on parents and their children. That was against their decisions. And parents had no other options. You saw the school board meetings. You saw the uproar. Take that into education. In Knox County, there's 25 schools in Knox County that are failing or below average schools, 25. And so what are you telling those parents who don't have other means to send their child to? But even let's say that you're in one of the best schools in Knox County, like a Farragut, but maybe that's not the best fit for that child, but they're zoned there, so they have to go there. But as a parent, you don't have an option because you're not rich. But if you're rich, you can send your kid to Webb or CAK. But if you don't have that means, what options do you have to make a better life for your child?
But some people say the $7,000 isn't enough. It's like it's all well and good. We're doing something to say, hey, we want to help you, but it wouldn't really pay for a private education anyway.
Well, I hear that, and so my rebuttal is, if it was $12,000, would you support it? If it was $15,000, would you support it? What you find out is people just throw out excuses. Instead of just saying they're opposed, they're like, well, it's not enough money. Well, let me just tell you, when you go to Webb or you go CAK, they have scholarships for people. Not everybody there pays full tuition. And so what this would allow is, whether or not it pays for the full tuition or not, it does allow the foundations in those schools to offer to more people, to have more opportunities and to expand. And so the $7,000 is what currently the state pays for public schools, but it is a start. But private schools already pay 100% tuition for some students. This will allow more opportunities in those schools.
What about the people who say this allows these schools to pick and choose, and then that's kind of a way of, like, you know, being biased against maybe some students, say, hey, we'll let, lack of a better term, Billy in, but we're not going to let Sally in?
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of the public schools pick and choose. City schools in the state of Tennessee can allow for people to come outside the city to pay tuition to come into their school system. They can pick and choose who they want. They don't have to be zoned for those city schools. You had an article in the Tennessean from about Davidson County schools. The 5 best schools, high schools in Davidson County, were all applicant only, where they pick and choose who can attend those high schools. The non-applicant or zone schools are the worst in Davidson County. So these school systems already have choice internally. They're allowing people, they can pick and choose. Once again, what it is they just want to throw out these talking points to try to tell people that they should not have a right to determine where their child should go to school, and let the state use their taxpayers to their tax money returned to them to allow them to make the best decision.
Last question on that: does this get passed this session?
Yes, I mean, I think it does. I mean, look, another issue that people throw out is, well, we shouldn't use public education dollars into private schools. That's just wrong. Well, let's talk about the Hope Scholarship in the state of Tennessee. The Hope Scholarship is through the Tennessee Lottery. Some of those proceeds go into a Hope Scholarship. We allow people who graduate high school to use those in private higher education facilities. So are you saying that we shouldn't do that either? At the end, the parent and the child should be in charge of their education. You should not be defined by your zip code. And I think what you saw in this Vanderbilt poll that just came out this week, it showed that 58% of Republicans approve of universal choice for all Tennesseans, regardless of income. MAGA Republicans, 65%. Independents, 52% approve. The people who do not like it, 70% of the Democrats don't like it because they want progressive woke policies in our school that go like the National Education Association, transgender sports, boys using girls' bathrooms. They don't care about what books in the library. They want those woke policies in our schools, and parents need to have an out if that happens.
All right. Since you brought up that poll, there were several issues I wanted to get into from that. First off, abortion. Today, 53% of Tennesseans identify as pro-choice. They support exceptions. 80% say in the case of rape or incest abortion, that should be an option. Are our laws going to change? Is there any change, any discussion on voting on something to tweak it in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, a couple years ago, we were able to get the life of the mother exception put into the Tennessee law. I'm okay with rape and incest. You just have to make sure that you can't go to the end of term. Unfortunately, there was a Democrat member, one of the more liberal Democrat members, who filed a bill this week or last week that basically allowed you to abort up to 9 months. And that's a little too far. But you have to have something that's reasonable. Yes, rape and incest, yes. Life of the mother, yes. I think we should do that. Hopefully we can get some votes to do it. I do believe in the exceptions.
Okay, so that'll be one of those things that they tackle. Marijuana also came up in that Vanderbilt poll, saying that 63% of voters support the legalization of recreational marijuana. 36% oppose it. There are studies that show that it's good. There are studies that show that it's bad. Everyone has an opinion. In fact, I just loved it because Elton John came out here last week and just said, he said that legalizing marijuana in America and Canada is one of the greatest mistakes of all time. So with that in mind, not that Elton John's setting any policies here, you might invite him to speak on the subject, I guess, but will there be any tweaks? Is there room there to work with that?
Well, look, I don't think recreational, no. I don't think in the state of Tennessee you see recreational. If it's truly medical purposes, then there's a conversation to be had. You know, supposedly President Biden was going to move it off of a Schedule 1 to move it down where states could then start regulating and doing it and do it legally. If it's for medical purposes and it looks like medical purposes and it's used for medical diagnosis, not these very broad medical diagnosis, I think we can get there for medical, but not recreational.
Okay, so as far as recreational, that's not even happening. 86%, according to this poll, again, of Tennesseans, registered gun owners, I guess, or registered voters, excuse me, said that they strongly or somewhat support passing laws that would require gun owners to report if their gun was lost or stolen. Will this legislation get passed on that specific issue? Hey, if your gun gets stolen or it's lost, you need to report it.
Well, I mean, is it just a reporting mechanism? Because what happens when you talk to the other side of the aisle, they're like, we just want to report it. But then you're like, okay, well, what's the consequence if they don't report it? What is the consequence? Is it a crime? If it's a crime, then is it a misdemeanor or is it a felony? And so there's a lot of questions.
What are you hearing that they want?
I think if you ask that question, like, should you report your gun being lost or stolen? People will say yes. Okay, if you don't, and it's a misdemeanor or a felony, are you okay with that? People say about safe storage. Well, if you don't safely store and somebody steals your gun, you should be held to, it should be a crime. Okay, so you're going to charge somebody with a crime when the criminal stole their gun from them, right? So then it really gets into gun registration in the end. And so all that leads to, if you're not careful, to gun registration, which nobody wants.
And same with like red flag laws. You have some people, it's a 73% agreed that they're, well, excuse me, I'm using the wrong number there, 78% support that. Is that in the way they're asking the question, do you think? Or do you think that truly is 78% of Tennesseans say, oh, yeah, we should have those red flag laws?
Well, once again, let's talk about what the red flag laws are like. You look at Florida. What happens in Florida, anybody who files that, I could go to the court and say, hey, I have a neighbor who I think it's automatically approved. There's no hearing for you
Right.
prior. They just go ahead and the judge says, you know what, I don't know what's right and wrong. I'm going to remove them and we'll work this out over the next 6 to 9 months. It's more like you take out a domestic thing against somebody.
Right.
So if you go to the Knox County Courthouse on that day, you'll see hundreds of people down there taking out different things for restraint against one another.
Right.
If it's like that, that's never going to work because you get mad at somebody, you see it in divorce proceedings all the time, right? And so I don't think that works in our state. Look, what does work, if you voluntarily give up your guns due to a mental issue. Now, if you're mentally diagnosed as an issue, that's a different conversation. But at that point, you have to, even for domestic violence and other things, you need to tell them who you're giving the guns to, and there's some accountability. Listen, Scott County, Tennessee, on one form, when someone says, hey, I'm going to give my guns over, all they did is ask for a name. Who'd you give them to? There's some accountability there. They have not had a problem since. Prior to that, they wouldn't give up the gun because they said they were, but they didn't. So look, there's common sense to do before you start getting into something that, like a red flag, that's a problem in Florida.
I want to get into 2 more issues. Deportation of illegal immigrants. 84% of Tennesseans, according to the Vanderbilt poll, support deporting illegal immigrants who have a criminal record. What is the legislature's role in that?
I didn't know we had 16% progressive liberals in our state, because I don't know how you could be against that. How can you be against deporting illegals who are committing crimes in our state, in our country? They should not be here, and so they need to be sent back.
Will you and will the lawmakers be supporting that? Because I know that's where the governor stands.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the problem that sheriffs have right now in our state, when they pick up someone who's a criminal, who's illegal, they call the Biden administration, nobody comes. Under the previous Trump administration, they would call ISIS, they would come pick them up. Biden administration just turns and doesn't do anything. It's just like with the border, it's porous. And so, yeah, they need to be deported, no questions asked.
Last issue here, running for governor. You have been mentioned, along with, say, Knoxville Mayor Glenn Jacobs and Damon Hinninger, the CEO, the county, excuse me, I said Knoxville, Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs, let me get that right. Damon Hinninger, the CEO of Core Civic. Senator Marsha Blackburn's been mentioned, Representative Tim Burchett. So I don't want, you're not going to speak for anyone else, but speaking for you, is that even on the plate, and why or why not would you consider running?
Well, look, I appreciate everybody pontificating. I do appreciate being in the conversations. I've never said I was or wasn't. That decision will be made later. What I do know, though, if you take me out of it and I'm looking at who may be running, I think the one name that keeps being left off is Bill Hagerty. I think Bill Hagerty would be a great governor for our state. If Bill Hagerty runs, I'm going to support Bill Hagerty.
Okay.
I think it follows in line with having successful business people. If I'm not running, I want Bill Hagerty to be governor. That's who I think will be the best. I'm hopeful that he will run. Outside of that, we'll see what happens in the months ahead, but I'm hopeful that maybe Senator Hagerty
So as far as you are concerned, Bill out of the picture, is that a possibility?
It's always a possibility. We'll take a look. I'm young. You never know. Hopefully, I have much life to go if God blesses me to live longer. There's a lot of great people who are thinking about running. There's some people, Congressman John Rose would be great. I think he would be.
He was on the list too.
He also should be on that list, right? But I think if you're looking, I think what we need is someone who is conservative, who understands business, who can get the job done, and who's not afraid to tackle tough challenges. And we'll see what that looks like.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll bring in our pundits to talk about everything that House Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, had to say, and maybe some other things as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. A moment ago, we heard from Speaker Cameron Sexton on really a wide range of topics, including school vouchers, abortion, gun laws, the looming governor race. So let's bring in our panel of pundits to talk about what he had to say. And joining us today, Craig Griffith, Michael Covington, and Shelley Breeding is in for Courtney today. Let's start where we started that conversation with him, which was school vouchers. Your reaction to what he had to say, and we'll start here in the middle with Shelley.
As I've said before, I'm opposed to school vouchers. You have to look at the cost of them. It's $7,000 per student. They're starting off with 20,000 of these. It's a little bit over 7,000. It's $140-some million. In addition to a $2,000 bonus, it's a one-time. To me, it's almost.
Can you separate those, though? If you separate those.
He won't separate them.
I know, but if we did separate those, would you support that part?
No.
No?
No. And Sexton, he references Nashville schools. He references the top 5 schools. They're all private schools in Nashville. One of the schools is Montgomery Bell Academy. I didn't look up the other ones, but it's an all-boys school in Nashville. The tuition there is $37,000 a year. And somehow this magical $7,000 a year payment is going to allow families to be able to send their kids there. It's not. Let's be realistic. In Knoxville, Webb School's $26,000 a year. CAK, those are the 2 largest schools, private schools, $14,000 a year. It isn't. Other states who have done this, it has shown that 90% of the people receiving this money are the families with their kids already in private school.
Well, Michael, to you, the fact that he mentions it, yes, okay, it is more than 7,000, but that's a start, and some of these kids can get scholarships. So it is a way for people to actually get their kids into a better school.
And Don, we're talking about possibly a small number. I'm okay with the voucher program if only 7 to 8% of the actual students who use the vouchers are actually students who absolutely need them. Because I think that number, that small percentage, is representative of students who really desperately want to get out of a failing school or get out of the school itself. Some schools have a culture within them and students within them that make parents not want their children in school with those children. That is just the bottom line. So I'm wanting the voucher program to go through for that small percentage, accepting the fact that there will be those who have the ability to pay private school tuition that will take advantage of that $7,000. I'm okay with that.
Greg, final word for you.
Well, you know, as we've talked about before, you know, where did this $7,000 number come up from? I mean, Shelley just quoted some figures, and last week I pointed out where a study showed that the average elementary school tuition in Tennessee for private school is $11,700. So it's, you know, it's not even close. And who are they expecting to make up that difference? So, you know, and it gets down to, you know, yes, okay, there are schools that are failing in Tennessee, there's no question about it. But could an infusion of $144 million, which is what they're setting aside for the voucher program, could that help those schools get any better? And they're public schools, those are public dollars. Maybe that's what we should do.
And let's point out that $144 million is without the $172 million, that's the one-time teacher bonus, and without the $35 million per year to increase the program.
Yeah, well, they have to have all these sweeteners. And again, as I pointed out before, one of the main problems they have with the voucher program are the rural schools. You know, first of all, where there aren't many private schools to begin with, and where there's, you know, concerns about you get the vouchers to these schools, there's no strings attached. Whereas if you're a rural school education leader, you have all the testing requirements that the state has on the books for your students to, you know, to be judged well. So, you know, they claim that's not a fair situation, then you have to agree with them.
Other issues he discussed, of course, abortion. He said that there might be some room there to add some things. Where do you see that going in this legislative session?
I'd like to think that the supermajority of Republicans in Nashville will see fit to loosen the reins on this whole abortion issue just a little bit. You know, there should not be a consideration or concern that a woman who is violated or raped and conceives a child in the act of that crime has to carry that child to term. I know there are those who say, well, it's a baby, but at some point, there has to be a little bit more control that parents, or not parents, but individuals have when it comes to making a decision about rape or incest. Those are situations where let's give those individuals who are already suffering as a result of a crime or some violent sexual act, let's give them a break. Let's give them a pass on having someone help them make the decision.
Shelley, do you see it actually going that way?
Unfortunately, I don't. I mean, the majority of Tennesseans are either pro-choice or somewhat pro-choice versus those who are clearly pro-life or somewhat pro-life. Overwhelming majority want exceptions for rape, for incest, and they want to loosen the language on the life of the mother, the serious health concerns of the mother. I just don't think our legislature will do it. They haven't done it in the past. The position of the constituents hasn't changed. I don't have very much faith that they're going to get anything done this session either.
And not on a specific issue, Craig, but more on the broad looking at 3/4 of Republicans view the state as on the right track. 80% of Democrats say it's on the wrong track. That is a deep, deep divide. Can there be any compromise, and can there really be any working together in this session?
Well, to the abortion thing, I don't think that they're going to be able.
Right.
They do not want to open up that can of worms. They do not want to have the very vocal anti-abortion lobby in Tennessee come to them and say, no, that's a primary killer if you start to open up the laws that have already been passed. So I don't think that's going to work. Secondly, on the other question, you know, we have this Vanderbilt poll where it shows, you know, certain things like people are overwhelmingly for, you know, additions to the abortion law of, you know, rape and incest and things like that. But they must be polling people who aren't voters, because the people who have voted have sent people who are strongly anti-abortion back to the legislature. So there seems to be this fundamental disconnect between the people that they sample for that poll and then the people that vote, who send people who are staunchly anti-abortion, staunchly no gun control in the issues. So that's fundamental, and I don't think it's going to change.
Right. And we could analyze that, and then we'll have to do that at another time to get into that, because a lot of people do say it's how you ask the question and who you talk to exactly. All right, we're going to take a pause, but the conversation continues. We'll also be getting into the governor's race, so to speak, right after this. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Let's pick back up where we left off. And I did mention we were going to talk about the governor's race, so we'll start there. And if we have time, we'll get into other issues. But there are a lot of people, I mean, at least there's like a half dozen names that are being mentioned. And we did ask the speaker about it as well. He seemed to be supporting a candidate, a particular candidate, but not really saying where he stood on the whole thing. How do you see the governor's race playing out? Craig, we'll start with you.
It's a lifetime away.
It's a lifetime away.
Yeah.
Well,
so there are a lot of dominoes that have to fall for any one of these candidates.
There's 6 people in it that we're hearing about. Is there someone that's not being mentioned that could slip in, or are we really talking maybe just 2 or 3 of those 6 people?
I would say 2 or 3 of the 6 people. I don't know that there's anybody. And that's one of the interesting things about Tennessee. You only elect 3 statewide positions in Tennessee. You know, your 2 senators and your governor. So there's really not a base of people who have run for statewide that have gotten their name out there to serve as sort of a bench for the elections in the future. But I think, you know, it's going to determine, you know, people, can I raise enough money? Because it'll be expensive.
Yes.
You know, do I have enough support across the state to make this a real deal? And third, on the Republican side, who's Trump going to support?
Yeah.
Who's going to get his blessing? So, you know, it'll be interesting. We can watch it, and it's fun to speculate about it. But you know, there's a lot of water to go under that bridge.
Shelley, your take.
Yeah, I'm with Craig. It's a long time away at this point.
Right.
I think the names being thrown out there are interesting. I mean, obviously, I think Mayor Jacobs is interesting and going to run, it seems like. Bill Haggerty, you know, Cameron Sexton talked about him. I could see him running. He's ran a statewide race, so I think he has a little bit of an advantage. And then you have Marsha Blackburn, who's kind of a wild card. She's 72. The race is in 2 years. She'll be 74. She would be 78 at the end of the term. I don't know age-wise that it's the right time for her. I think if she were younger, we were talking about she'd probably be a candidate. To Craig's point on who Trump would endorse, I don't know. I mean, Bill Haggerty, we were talking about, was ambassador to Japan for Trump. And then you have Jacobs, who has been at Trump events, and they seem to be friends and close. I don't know, but I do think that that's going to be a factor on who he endorses in the Republican race.
You're both hitting on that. Michael, does someone jump out sooner rather than later, even though it is, like Craig said, there's a lot of water still to go, and there's a lifetime away? Does someone try to say, hey, I'm going to get my name out there before anyone else?
Well, I look at Governor Lee in his initial race for governor. His name wasn't even being discussed initially. It was Randy Boyd and a couple of other individuals who were spending a ton of money. And Governor Lee, well, Bill Lee came along and made a trip to Market Square, and all of a sudden he had Knox County, and the rest of it fell into place for him. I think this election I think Craig and Shelley are right. It's a lifetime away, but 2025 is a city election year. City elections are weak. No one really has a lot of interest in the city council, the mayor's race. There's just not really a lot of interest in it. So we're going to skip right past the city elections and be turning our focus and our attention on 2026, the mayor's race and the governor's race and all the other things that are going to be coming into play. A ton of money is going to be spent. A ton of money has been raised. In order to spend all that money, you don't want to go the Kamala Harris route. You want to spread your money out. You don't want to spend it all. So they're going to start to trickle things out there and start to align themselves with individuals who they think can influence voters.
Yeah. And does it matter if who else endorses you if you get Trump's endorsement?
No, but it matters. You know, it always helps to have a Haslam endorsement. in the state of Tennessee. They seem to be able to raise a lot of money. But there are other people that can, endorsements can bring, some interest in your race and also some money. And money's the lifeblood of elections, so it all depends. Will you be able, do you think you can raise enough money to run a statewide race?
Well, we are out of time, but I'm going to give you a chance if you want to. You have a prediction who wins. That's all, not just a name.
Who wins?
Jacobs?
No.
No?
No production. No prediction.
The Kentucky Derby?
No. Yeah.
Just as much.
Look at it, very political. Hey, thank you very much for watching.
Merry
See you
Christmas,
next week.
Happy New Year,
See you
everybody.
next week.
Merry Christmas.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Next Star Broadcasting.